Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. This afternoon, the UK and Poland signed a new bilateral 2030 partnership committing us to even deeper foreign policy, security and defence cooperation. It goes without saying, but I will say it nonetheless, that Poland is a close friend and a valued ally. When the foreign sector and I fly from RAF Northolt, as we regularly do, we are confronted with a regular reminder of the closeness of our relationship as we drive past the Spitfire aircraft emblazoned with the red and blue insignia of the Polish pilots that flew it, reminding us of the bravery of those Polish fighters then, helping us to defend our freedom in the 1940s. And once again, we stand shoulder to shoulder defending freedom in our joint support of Ukraine in its attempt to defend itself against Russia's unprovoked and illegitimate full-scale invasion. We agreed that NATO is the bedrock of our collective defence and security, and our focus will be in ensuring the realisation of the strategic concept and the full implementation of the deterrence and defence of the Euro-Atlantic area. Our 2030 partnership sets out priorities on issues ranging from the Western Balkans to China cooperation on defence capabilities and on operations, and it builds on our 2017 treaty on defence and security cooperation and the 3 decades of our close partnership. We stand together as foreign ministers and defence ministers against a backdrop of conflict on our continent. But of course our relationship is not just about mutual defence and security, as important as that is. Last year, for example, bilateral trade between our two countries topped £27 billion. That is the highest volume ever. And over 1 million Poles have applied to settle here, making their homes and their lives in the United Kingdom. So we have a shared history, we have a close bond, and we have a positive future. And so I welcome our guests from Poland, and I thank them for the cooperation on these multitude of important issues. Thank you.
Szanowni Państwo.
Ladies and gentlemen, our meeting today is a continuation of these talks that take place in the quadriga format traditionally, which are a milestone and a firm base of our bilateral cooperation. It is also something exceptional, which stresses, as my colleague has just pointed out, close cooperation and partnership, both in the area of foreign policy and in the area of security. The meeting in London this year takes place as a special time. Beyond the Poland's eastern border, there's a war. And soon, the summit in Vilnius, the NATO summit in Vilnius, will bring crucial decisions regarding the future of our alliance, and our British allies and friends have been the right partners to discuss the preparation for this summit and also our common approach to the global issues. And I can confirm that our points and views are highly convergent. Britain is a partner that we can rely on. The United Kingdom have supported us during the migration crisis on the border with Belarus, and also they are active. British soldiers are stationed in Poland and are active on the eastern flank, and they strengthen our security, the security of both Poland and also the Baltics. We are very closely monitoring the British evolution in its foreign and security policy. There is this integrated overview of the developing security and foreign policy, where Poland has its place in the way that the UK perceives the world. We are very glad that the fruit of today's meeting is this joint declaration on the partnership, which is compelling and shall describe our collaboration until 2030. We are focusing on defense and security, but there are other topics, and the significance of this partnership 2030 is much wider. We confirmed cooperation, for example, in the EU neighbourhood policy issues, in the Indo-Pacific issues, and all the global challenges that we both face. We naturally look eastward, and we have confirmed Polish-British collaboration in the support of Ukraine. What is key for Poland is Britain's long-term military presence on the NATO eastern flank. We are aware that once we stand against Russia's crimes together, we stand united, and we hope that continued collaboration in this area will not only strengthen us, make us more resilient, but help us in future challenges. And finally, I would like to point out that this beautiful palace, Lancaster House, has its connection with Polish history. It was this room, the music room. And the year 1848, when the Polish composer Frédéric Chopin played for Queen Victoria and for Albert, her consort. I would like to thank you for today's meeting. I would like to thank you for those productive talks that we held, and for the Polish-British relations being again reconfirmed, re-established, and I can reassure everybody we are looking forward to future cooperation.
Welcome to have a quadriga where we all sit down together and pretty much agree on nearly everything on the agenda. It's a nice change often together, and it reflects our deep and long history of friendship. Over 150 years we have been military allies, and in the connection to history, my own mother's family hosted Polish officers in the Second World War in Scotland during that process. It is a long-running, deep alliance and friendship, and no one should be surprised, least of all the Kremlin, how in step we were together in resisting Russia's invasion of Ukraine and providing the very real support to Ukraine in resisting that illegal invasion. Britain and Poland puts its money where its mouth is. It hasn't just condemned Russia with words, it has condemned Russia with its direct support to Ukraine, using Polish airfields to help get into Ukraine the very important equipment that was needed right from the start. Without question, without quibble, Poland was strong and supportive and brave in making sure it stood strong for Ukraine, hosting lots of Ukrainian refugees, being open to them. I remember Polish citizens turning up at bus stations in Warsaw on speculation to take people who were fleeing what was then perceived to be a mass invasion of Ukraine. Without Poland, there would not have been the resistance that we see successfully in Ukraine. Without the United Kingdom and its military support and its lead in donations, there wouldn't have been the scale, and this partnership is enduring. Both of us are with Ukraine to the end. There is no rolling back. There's only strength and a determination to keep the international community together. And in longer-term partnerships, the defence deals that we have both signed, Mariusz and I, over the last 2 to 3 years, both in industrial development together, on air defence, on shipping and other capabilities, show that we're in it for the long term. these defence deals aren't one-year things, they're 20-year events, shows quite how determined we are to share each other's skills and knowledge to make sure we make our own citizens safe at home. So it has been a good quadriga. I'm delighted. I certainly know that I meet Marios at least 3 or 4 times every 6 months. I think we've met twice in the last 2 months. We have a strong role to play. And we should also not forget that, the emergence of Poland as the 5th biggest economy in Europe, soon to be one of the biggest military powers in Europe, that is something that we must all sit up and take notice of. For Britain as a friend and ally, that is a welcome partnership. We will continue to invest in that and stand side by side. We both know what the threat is, we both know who the enemy is, and we're not going to back down in the face of those threats. And throughout this, we are going to be mutually on each other's side, not just through NATO but bilateral relations. And certainly, as we husband in both Finland and hopefully Sweden to the NATO alliance, Poland and Britain will have a strong role in that process. And if, as we both hope, at some stage Ukraine joins the NATO alliance, I can guarantee Britain and Poland will be there side by Ukraine to husband them into the most successful military alliance in history.
Ja chciałem bardzo serdecznie podziękować.
Let me wholeheartedly thank for this opportunity of meeting again our British friends. I would like to stress that we have been on a more or less day-to-day contact with Ben. And Ben has visited Warsaw quite recently, both for the B9 meeting and the Northern Partnership meeting. I'm very grateful for this cooperation. Its fruit, to mention at least some of it, is a joint short distance system that has been deployed in Poland and in Ustka. On the military field, we started testing that system. That's a top technology. The short-range military launchers technology is top technology, and we are very grateful for it. We also value British military presence in Poland within the EFB, but also the military presence which has returned in the consequence of the Russian aggression in Ukraine. British soldiers have been there, have been in the field to support Polish soldiers, but they also eased our capability to assist Ukraine. The other thing we value very highly is the British Sky Sabre unit, which protects the lock hub, which channels aid to Ukraine. The next item on my list of praise is 2 years ago, when Poland has been trying to counter a Belarusian hybrid attack, I turned to Ben, and the British soldiers have been supported, the Polish soldiers, by building a temporary fence on the border with Belarus. That has had, no doubt, its effect in easing the attacks, which have not been as intense since. These are all very clear and concrete examples of how much we can rely on our British friends, British allies, and our relations are strengthening NATO in its turn. We are sharing both our approach and attitude to the aggression that we face. We also share our concept of how we can deter the aggression that we face and how we can strengthen the eastern flank. Our industrial cooperation is also something worth mentioning. I will have the opportunity tomorrow to talk to Babcock and MDA, the British companies that we collaborate with. in building the narrow system, the short-range defense system, but also building frigates, which are being constructed with large input from the UK. I can say that without this cooperation, we would not be able to build these frigates. We are valuing our collaboration very highly. I can keep repeating that. I also would like to mention that for the future, we want to deepen this collaboration. The next subject we mentioned was the NATO summit in Vilnius, and we tried to coordinate our stand, our position on this summit, and I have to say we found no discrepancies. Our main aim is to strengthen this North Atlantic alliance and to create a clear path for Ukraine to join. Another point I can mention is to consolidate within NATO so that we stand united, because strength is in the Union.
Questions, and we will go first to James Landau from the BBC.
Good afternoon, James Landau from the BBC. Foreign Secretary and Foreign Minister Raoul, can I ask you about NATO next week? What do you want NATO to promise Ukraine about its potential future membership? And secondly, can I also ask you about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant? What is your assessment of the potential risk from reports that Russia has placed explosives on some of the reactors there? How concerned are you about that?
On our hopes for Ukraine, the alliance has spoken clearly and with one voice. We made the statement to Bucharest that Ukraine's future is within NATO. The timing for that was never tightly defined, but what we have seen over the last 16, 17, 18 months is the Ukrainian armed forces evolve, adapt, and modernize at an incredible rate. They, of course, have done so with the training support of the UK Armed Forces and other friends and allies. They are now very experienced in the utilization of NATO standard equipment, NATO doctrine, and NATO tactics. So however long it might otherwise have taken Ukraine to join NATO, their actions will inevitably have shortened that timescale. As Ben says, my friend, the Defence Secretary, has said, the process by which Sweden and Finland applied to join, and Finland has ultimately already joined NATO, was a truncated one because we recognise they're highly capable military nations, and I think we should reflect upon that when we discuss what process would be appropriate for Ukraine to join. But I think it's incumbent upon us to recognise how much of an improvement we have seen in their military capability over the last 18 months. And with regard to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, of course I saw the reporting that has broken overnight. Obviously I'm not going to comment on any of our domestic intelligence assessments, but the broad point, the general point, is that we would not even be having discussions of this nature were it not for the fact that Vladimir Putin initiated an unprovoked full-scale invasion of Ukraine last year. We should never lose sight of the fact that the damage to civilian infrastructure, the damage to Ukrainian energy infrastructure, the rape and murder of Ukrainian people, the theft and deportation of Ukrainian children, and these risks to nuclear power installations are all a direct result of Putin's illegitimate and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. And the sooner that we can draw this to a successful conclusion, where Ukraine gets sovereignty of its own country back, the sooner these issues will be put behind us. We've got to move on, James, sorry.
Could I?
Sorry.
Could I answer this? Panie redaktorze, my...
Sir, we in Poland, what do we in Poland expect from that summit? Well, what we expect is an unequivocal confirmation, without any doubt, a confirmation that the future of Ukraine is in the NATO as a full-fledged member. The situation compared to the Bucharest summit in 2008 has changed. Ukraine has confirmed, and it paid an extremely high price for the fact, confirmed that it is part and parcel of the Western security architecture, that Ukraine fights for European values, for our values, and on the eastern flanks, we can see the fight for our freedom, for our safety and security. That is why we have no doubt that on this summit, Ukraine will become institutionally closer to NATO. There are issues already which raise no doubts that this bond has to be institutionalized. We are discussing it, and Poland stands very clearly on trying to bring Ukraine closer to NATO on the institutional level, to help align Ukraine's political and military structures to those that are standard within NATO. Once that happens, our closeness will be confirmed. And once those conditions will be met, we can start thinking of a relatively quick pace in bringing Ukraine to NATO. And now, the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia, that is what your second question was about. We in Poland have our own opinion confirmed by the experience of long generations of Poles regarding Russia's step. Russia is predictable in its unpredictability. That's what we say. And that includes the minds of the majority of the blocks of the units in this nuclear power plant. As James has put it, it would not be right for me to speculate now, to speculate on what will happen, what may happen. But I can reassure you that in any new unprecedented situation, both Poland and the UK will respond accordingly. Dariusz, Polish TV. A question for all of you. You mentioned the NATO summit in Vilnius. You mentioned aid for Ukraine. My question is, what can Ukraine expect in terms of military aid, military help? And the minister for Vilnius for the Lithuanian issue. PKW Lithuania. Poland stands in solidarity with its ally. That's why we now have a unit which will act as a deterrent, which will secure our safety, which will act as a security unit. As my colleague has mentioned, Russia is predictable in its unpredictability, while NATO is strong through solidarity, through cooperation between its member states. That is why we support Lithuania in cybersecurity, and we are ready to invest in deterrence. We are developing the Polish army, but we are also trying to implement the principle we are stronger together. That's why we are open to cooperation, which will allow us to achieve more. Let me give you one example of a win-win situation, which is Polish-British cooperation in in the air defense, in the anti-missile defense systems. We are all set to collaborate.
George Cruz, The Times. Probably
George Cruz.
since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we've heard a lot of language about NATO's centre of gravity shifting east, and we've now seen Germany increasing its permanent deployment in Lithuania to 4,000 troops, a brigade. Even if the UK can't do it immediately, would the UK be open to increasing its permanent deployment in Estonia to a brigade level similarly? And very quickly to my Polish counterparts as well. You've talked about how important it is for British troops to be in Eastern Europe. Would you like to see more of them?
So, George, just on the reported permanent brigade by Germany in Lithuania, you're going to have to wait because we're going to get some clarity on that. I met my German counterpart and my Canadian counterpart only as recently as Singapore, and there was no intention at that time to have a permanent brigade. We have all done what was being asked of us by those Baltic states, which we have annotated a permanent brigade to our permanent battle groups, effectively. We have always a battle group deployed in Estonia from the United Kingdom, and indeed Germany has in Latvia and Lithuania a number of these enhanced forward presence. We've gone the next step, which is annotated an actual brigade headquarters and a brigade, and we've only just finished exercising deploying that brigade at a rapid speed into Estonia. But they both deliver the same outcome.
Ja chciałbym dodać, że wojska
And I would like to mention that British troops are present in Poland. There is a battle group which is headed by the Americans, commanded by the Americans, and we highly value the British troops in Poland. Ben Wallace has been with me, and we witnessed the exercises in the north of Poland, which is really important. There is a Suwałki land border between Poland and Lithuania, a corridor of 60 kilometers, where we have Bielorussia on one side, which, operationally speaking, we can say is like Russia. On the other hand, you have Kaliningrad, which is Russia proper. So to have a location for our allies in this particular point is crucial for the security of NATO as a whole. But I would also like to stress that the countries on the eastern flank of NATO are focused on collaborating and on spending more than 2% of GDP on security. We are not trying to use agency to support our security. We cooperate, which makes us stronger, and that is the reason why we can stop the Russian imperial power rebuilding itself. Central European nations know very well how threatening that would be. But even Britain have already had a taste of how threatening Russia can be. Let me just mention Sergei Skripal. That was something which had an impact on ordinary man in the street, not just somebody who lives in some international center. There were British citizens who were impacted by that. So let's not forget that Russia is a brutal country, that Russia is a threatening country, and it threatens Britain as well as others. So the best way to counter that is to deter. And thanks to the activity of the UK, this deterrence is happening in the eastern flank of NATO, and we are very grateful in this.
Polish Public Radio. I'd like to ask about some details about 2030 partnership, which you have just signed. What details does it entail? How is that different from the declaration which ended the previous quadriga? And what's the, significance of the date itself?
Thank you. Well, this is an evolution of an already strong partnership, and we've joked, Ben has joked, but he makes a light-hearted reference to a very important point, that actually this has been one of the more straightforward bilateral sets of discussions, because we are very closely aligned on many issues. Obviously, because of the situation that we have seen with Russia's brutal attempted invasion of Ukraine, we have enhanced focus on our mutual defence and security and a coordination of our foreign policy, both in the Euro-Atlantic area, but also more widely, including with regards to our collective posture towards China and the Indo-Pacific region. Ben has already meant that, well, the respective defence ministers have already spoken about direct enhanced cooperation on equipment, military technology, and the shared use, the shared development of that. And when you have something as significant as Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine, it is important that you do a stocktake of the pre-existing relationship. It is in a good place. So for those that were expecting this quadriga would be a fundamental shift compared with what went before, sadly you will be disappointed, because the foundation stones were solid, the relationship is good, we find ourselves, as I say, in natural alignment on many of the regional and global issues, on tackling illegal migration, the use of poor and dispossessed people as a political tool, which we saw on the border between Belarus and Poland, or whether through the human trafficking that sadly we see on our own borders, we have a shared incentive to make sure that that we work together on those issues, and on ensuring, as I say, the good bilateral trade figures that we discussed, which are often overshadowed because of the defence and security backdrop, that we lock in that positivity and strive for more. So this is really an enhancement and amplification of what was already a high-functioning bilateral relationship, to make sure it continues to be one of the UK's real points of positivity in our international, in our basket of international relationships.
Jeśli mogę dodać.
If I may, let me add to this evaluation of my friend James. What really matters here is that both the UK and Poland have reached this stage of our collaboration by evolution, by collaborating, cooperating in all areas that have been mentioned here. But what really matters here is the moment when we announced and signed this declaration. Two very close collaborators, two countries who really understand each other, two countries who are characterized by the same sensitivity in terms of both human right and national sovereignty and national integrity, and while being geographically in different places in Europe. But once it comes to the European order, to the global order from European perspective, the order that relies on state of law, that rejects power struggle. In this context, we decided to unite even closer and to show other countries that there are ways to cope with threats to the world that we all know, and how we can collaborate in future. And that is what brought us to this decision. Two countries that lead by example, that show how you can become responsible for international issues, not just here in Europe, but everywhere. Everywhere where our determined efforts can bring fruit.